So when victory came, it was sweet and joyous.
Tell me, you seem thrilled. Why?
I am so thrilled.
Why? Why?
New blood in the Congress, and it's just so wonderful because I've had enough of what's been going on, and this represents change for me.
The Democrats took the House, the lower chamber of Congress, and it made their night, winning enough seats to break the Republicans' stranglehold on Congress and prize power away from the president.
Today is more than about Democrats and Republicans. It's about restoring the Constitution's checks and balances to the Trump administration.
The Democratic victory rode on the shoulders of a more diverse field of candidates than the nation had ever seen.
Can a congresswoman wear her hair in braids, rock a black leather jacket?
And that's exactly what this is. Not a campaign or an election day, but a movement.
At 29, the New Yorker becomes the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. She's among a cavalcade of women who will take 100 seats in Congress for the first time, finally climbing to occupy nearly a quarter of the House. Two of them, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar from the Midwest, are the first Muslim women ever elected to Congress. Two others are the first Native American women, one of whom won in the conservative state of Kansas. We traced early interest in Sharice Davids last summer when the openly gay kickboxing candidate knocked out her Democratic rivals. Last night, she took out her Republican opponent in the same style.
This victory is significant in so many ways, not only for the Democrats here in Kansas, but for across the country. Sharice Davids represents a new political generation here in America, diverse in so many ways. And she decided to run because of one man, Donald Trump. It's fine. What should people draw from your win tonight?
Oh, they should draw that the Kansas 3rd Congressional District is ready for change.
This is a chance to just go exhale and say, okay, the sanity is coming back to America. You know, and this is our movement. This is our chance to come back and say, you know what, this is what America is about.
Other rising stars of the Democratic Party who ran exciting campaigns in the South failed by the narrowest of margins at the final stage. Andrew Gillum ran to become governor of Florida and endured a sustained racist onslaught of a kind that might have been unthinkable in modern times had Donald Trump not reset the standards for contest. Gillum's big tent politics sprung a leak on the night, but nothing seems to dampen his enthusiasm.
We will not be pushed into the shadows anymore, that we're here and that we are here to stay.
In neighbouring Georgia, another Democratic candidate for governor, Stacey Abrams, has refused to concede, demanding a rerun. Not only are the final results divided by the finest of margins, but there are questions over their legitimacy, given efforts by her opponent to suppress the votes of African Americans, long lines and voting machines for which no one could find power leads. In Texas, Beto O'Rourke captured the imagination of young people and Hispanic voters with his hipster vibe and straight-from-the-hip authenticity.
Beto, are there enough Democrats in Texas for you to win this?
There are enough Texans, and we're not running to represent Democrats. We're not representing to represent Republicans. We're running to represent Texans.
In the end, there weren't enough Texans to carry Beto over the line, but his party last night felt like a rock concert all the same.
I want to thank this amazing campaign of people, not a dime from a single pack, all people, all the time, in every single part of Texas, all of you.
His opponent, Senator Ted Cruz, cried poor and thanked the state for its belief in him.
We saw a $100 million race with Hollywood coming in against the state, with the national media coming in against the state. But all the money in the world was no match for the good people of Texas and the hard-working men and women across our state.
The defeat of Democratic candidates for Senate delivered Republicans like Ted Cruz an increased majority in the Senate. And they're not just any Republicans, they're Trumpian Republicans, whose phrasing sounds straight from the president's mouth.
When Casey and I launched this effort in January, the pundit class gave us no chance, and even today, the political and media class seem eager to write our obituary. But the great thing about our country is that every 2 years, The people have that one day in November where the elites don't call the shots.
The President of the United States.
At his post-election press conference, the president bragged at length over Republican wins in the Senate and threatened Democrats if they use their numbers in the House to investigate him, they'll pay the price.
They can play that game, but we can play it better because we have a thing called the United States Senate. And a lot of very questionable things were done between leaks of classified information and many other elements that should not have taken place. And they can look at us, and then we can look at them, and it'll go back and forth. And it'll probably be very good for me politically. I could see it being extremely good politically because I think I'm better at that game than they are, actually. Or we can work together.
With his comfortable majority in the Senate, the president can confirm all the judges he wants and even rewrite healthcare with nary a dissenting voice. There's no Republican moderate returning to the Senate, no John McCain. You might recognize this guy, though, Mitt Romney, who won his race in Utah last night.
And the victory tonight is more than a victory of a candidate for the United States Senate. I believe it's a call for greater dignity and respect.
Perhaps America got the result that fits it best. It is a nation divided and now has a split Congress to match. On one side, a Democratic majority House to pester and mess with presidential power. On the other, an arch and unforgiving president with a pliant Senate. As for anyone promising to reach across the aisle and work with their political rivals, Americans will believe it when they see it.
Well, now, with some races still too close to call or heading for a recount or even a runoff in Mississippi, this is the current state of play with the results. It was the rebuke of Donald Trump and his bellicose racial agenda in the suburban seats and by women that gave the House back to the Democrats. In a significant victory, they got the 218 seats they needed for a majority. They now have 220. The Republicans lost 27 seats. Nancy Pelosi is likely to become the Speaker, third in line to succeed the presidency under the U.S. Constitution. In what will become a deep frustration to President Trump, she will determine the legislative agenda and wield the power to subpoena anyone in his administration, launching investigations into any of the scandals that have dogged the White House. But in the Senate, it didn't go the Democrats' way. Many rural states like Indiana and North Dakota that backed Donald Trump threw out Democrat incumbent senators. Republican gains mean they now hold 51 seats and the Democrats 45. While Democrats got 6 more governorships across the country, Stacey Abrams is refusing to concede in Georgia and Andrew Gillum lost in Florida. Well, I've just rushed back from the White House myself, where President Trump was holding that press conference packed to the rafters. I did manage to ask the president about division and hostility throughout the campaign and how that can now end. This has been a very challenging campaign.
It's been a very challenging campaign.
It has involved quite a lot of abuse and a lot of violence. People have died during the course of this campaign.
Right.
Is there any way in which you think the temperature could be lowered? Perhaps peace could break out with the media? Perhaps your bipartisan relationships across the House and the Senate may now produce some change? Or are we going to have more of the same?
It's a very fair question. Look, I would love to see unity and peace and love and any other word you want to use. And obviously, I think we had to, especially at this particular juncture, we had to wait till after the midterms are over. Now they're over. If they would cover me fairly, which they don't, I'm not saying that in a hostile way. I get extremely inaccurate coverage. I can do something that's fantastic, and they'll make it look like not good. And I don't mind having bad stories. If I make a mistake, cover it. I would like you to cover it fairly, but cover it. I would love to see unity, including with the media, because I think the media, I'll be honest, I think it's a very divisive thing for our country. And you would be amazed at how smart people are that are reading your stories and seeing your stories and watching. You'd be amazed how perceptive and how smart they are. They get it. And it really does bring disunity. I didn't, excuse me, you are not called on.
Well, that was shortly after the atmosphere at the press conference had degenerated badly when he was asked by CNN about why he demonized the Mexican migrant caravan during the campaign.
Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other
Peter,
question,
let's
if
go.
I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have
I'm not concerned
indictments-
about anything with
that you
the
may have
Russian
indictments coming
investigation
down?
because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
Well, our Washington correspondent, Kylie Morris, is back from Kansas by plane, fortunately. Kylie, the implications for us abroad, the globe.
I think there are real implications for foreign policy, certainly, and that is because the makeup of the Senate has changed substantially now. There are real hawks who will now be advising President Trump. None of these are kind of the elders' council, if you like, of foreign policy on the Republican side. People like John McCain, Bob Corker, Jeff Flake, they're disappearing from the Senate. Instead, you have people who are very tough on Iran, very tough on China. So the idea that they're going to convince the president to change direction in any way when he clearly doesn't like being challenged. I mean, you saw that in the press conference. He called out Republicans who hadn't embraced him closely enough. He's quite bitter about that. He demands loyalty. So they will not be questioning the direction he takes. Indeed, I think there's every chance that they'll be cheerleading him into, if you like, taking a kind of deeper, stronger stance on Iran and China. So things aren't going to get more predictable, I don't think. And I think potentially we're going to get into more dangerous territory much more quickly.
Well, now I'm joined by President Obama's speechwriter. I'm delighted that you've been able to come, Cody Keenan. Let me ask you, given the considerable power to control the agenda given under the US Constitution to the Congress, to House, what are the Democrats going to do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, the view's a lot brighter from here than it was yesterday, that's for sure. What's most important about this, three things. Number one, President Trump's legislative agenda is dead. Obamacare is alive. And I think even more important, you have a Congress now that can actually be a check on the kind of behavior we've been seeing from the president. Oversight powers, subpoena power. And I think the American people will find it very refreshing to get some sort of proper oversight going on. As far as what legislation comes up first, I have no idea.
Well, you see, there's a really amazing contrast, because I was in the White House listening to his press conference, and he was jubilant. He said, I've won, I've done wonders. You know, it's the Senate that counts.
He's partially right on the Senate that counts. I don't think Democrats ever expected to take the Senate back last night, and that'll tie us up for a couple years. But at the same time, the president I heard in the press conference didn't sound like a president who had a massive victory last night. It sounded like a president who's trying to hide from what happened last night. And what's even more important to me than the fact that we took back one of the houses of Congress is the way we did it, and the way we won across the country. More young people than ever before, more women than ever before. A lot of America's future was elected last night.
Well, let me press you then on investigations, subpoenas, because that House has the power now to really hold the president to account. Tax returns, Russians.
Yeah, it protects the Russia investigation, that's for sure. Tax returns, I don't know if they'll ask for them or not, but he's obligated by law to turn them over. If he doesn't, we'll see what happens. I would hope he doesn't spark a constitutional crisis in the next couple months. But again, Democrats don't have that power until January, so there's a lot of lame duck to come.
But the potential to actually prosecute the president doesn't exist because the Senate can presumably stop it.
That's right.
So one of the things people will wonder is why you didn't do better in the country, because actually Democrats won 9% more votes than Republicans, and yet you lost these Senate seats.
We have
is this gerrymandering or what?
Partially. It's partially demographics. And there's, one thing I'm more concerned about is all the new voters who came out last night, convincing them that their votes actually do matter. Because that's a big problem. In the past 7 presidential elections, Republicans have lost popular votes 6 straight times. And for one party to either way win 9 million more votes but lose seats is something that's going to be troublesome to a lot of people.
Let me ask you one most important issue: climate change.
Climate change.
What can the House do about climate change? That's in the hands of the Senate too, and the man hates it.
It's in the hands of the Senate, it's in the hands of the president too. I mean, there's one political party on earth that doesn't believe in climate change, and they still control 2 branches of government. So hopefully the House starts putting forward some legislation. It's not really going to go anywhere, but part of controlling one chamber of Congress is you control the debate in a lot of ways.
Cody Keenan, thank you very much indeed for
having me on.
So that is the Democrats. What, though, of President Trump himself, and what What does he do now? I'm joined now by Trump supporter and presenter on RT America, Scotty Nell Hughes, and from New York by Jonathan Capehart of The Washington Post. Scotty.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to DC. I'm so happy you're here.
Certainly, well, blue, but you're actually red, aren't you?
You know what? At this point, though, I think just like we saw last night election, people voted for the candidate, not necessarily the party, which is what they've done in the past. Look at Florida. You have a Republican governor, a Republican senator, but in South Florida, you also had the same people voting for Democrat congressmen. I think this is a new era in America today where people are not just going to be identified by D or R.
Others who see it as a new division, that actually it emphasizes the division in America as never before. You have a House one side and a Senate the other.
But you know what they're united by? They're united. They do not like what's been going on. They do not like the fighting going on. They don't like what the parties are doing. So they're actually looking more, I think, at the people, at the message. But I mean, look at President Trump's tweets today. His first tweets out were talking about, you know what? Those people that didn't support me, they're out. That's kind of what they get, a part of his victory lap. You know, I think there is a sense we should all be optimistic right now, whether you're a Trump supporter or not, that they're actually going to get some things accomplished that works for Americans first and put not the party as the priority.
I don't know if you saw the news conference, but it wasn't exactly peaceful. And one wonders whether this bitterness, this anger and the rest of it, is he going to reach out? Can he actually be more partisan, more bipartisan rather, and really pull this country together?
Okay, well, let me tell you what I was watching that press conference for. I realized, and by the way, great question that you asked, for the next few hours, guess what we're talking about? That press conference. Because he threw so much for the media just to talk about and dive into, rightfully so. Guess what we're not talking about? The actual returns last night. We're actually taking away, this is what President Trump does, is he gives another piece of meat, another distraction that needs to be covered to cover something else. And I think the headlines this morning talking about losing the House, that's not what he wanted to dominate. So why not call a press conference and let it be a free-for-all?
Do you fear that he will be subject to very serious investigations?
I have no doubt that he is about to be covered in subpoenas. The question is that what's best for the American people? And will that actually help the Democrats in 2020? People don't like Washington, D.C. and the swamp, and there's nothing that says the swamp more than a bunch of subpoenas that don't go anywhere.
Well, I'm going to go to New York now. Jonathan Capehart, what do you make of that news conference and more particularly of the actual result and what it really will now lead to, Jonathan?
That press conference was absolutely extraordinary. The president was petulant. He was vengeful, particularly against the Republicans who didn't support him. The president of the United States, pre-election night, the one who didn't take responsibility for anything, never admits failure, always sees the sunny side of the street as it pertains to him and him alone, is the same president of the United States who spent 90 minutes berating the press and trying to put a happy face on what happened last night. Now, on the one hand, he has a right to be happy. The Senate remains in Republican control. They picked up a few seats, but it's the way the Republicans were able to hold on to their majority that is so troublesome. He went out on the campaign trail vigorously. I think it was 11 stops, 11 rallies, 8 states in 6
Jonathan,
days in the final hours of the. Yes, John.
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that Donald Trump himself can escape the inevitability of investigations? Might that be a card that the Democrats could play and say, look, we're certainly going to go down that road, but if you really cooperate with us, we might be able to do a few things together?
Absolutely. The Democrats are making it very clear that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. Nancy Pelosi, who might the House again, did a press conference right after President Trump's where she laid out the agenda that the Democrats want to pursue: health care, environment, jobs from coast to coast, as she said. But at the same time, she said that as an Article 1 branch of government, they have a co-equal branch constitutional responsibility to be a check and balance on the executive. And there are plenty of things for the Democrats to hold the Trump White House accountable for.
Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us from New York. Let me just ask you a final question. The contrast between today and last week, in the sense, do you feel this is a gloomy moment or a wondrous moment?
Well, it depends on from what perspective. From the
Yours.
White House perspective,
Yeah.
it's a little bit gloomy because obviously they don't have 100% control. And like Trump said, just having a good economy and jobs is not enough. From America's perspective, it's wonderful because it's actually going to show both sides are going to have a voice. The question is, how do they respectfully treat each other, and can we follow suit as a country?
Scotty, thank you very much indeed. Hotel bar in downtown Washington on election night. With all the tears last time round, they're taking no chances. Therapy dogs are on hand to deal with any distress. Miko's an old hand. Is this your dog?
Yeah, it is.
She's extremely, well, therapeutic.
Well, good. That's why she's here.
Some of the others have a lot to learn. At American University, the Republican Club sits politely. All these students are first-time voters. There's not been much joy here. The Senate races haven't been declared. But when the pizzas arrive, you've got it. Finally, real results start formulating. What motivated these young Republicans? Trump or party?
I think I agree with a lot of his policies, but personality.
Tone the language down.
Exactly. Yes.
You were in the White House with Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
I was a reporter outside.
Yes.
Donald Trump is not Ronald Reagan.
Absolutely not. But I think Republicans who are in leadership, positions have to help take stock of why some of the losses might have happened, why some of the wins may also have happened, and we have to decide who we are as a party.
Finally, to the Democratic Women's Club. As we arrive, the Democrats win the lower house of Congress. Champagne everywhere, and an interlude of joy after several winters of discontent.
We now have a chance to start righting the ship. Slowly, but a chance. Yeah.
But they all know, whilst they can at least begin to challenge Trump, they are very far from overwhelming him. For now, celebration is at least in order. Well, now, breaking news. As I mentioned just before that report, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, has gone. Whether he's pushed or otherwise, we don't yet know, but it's pretty clear he has just decided he had enough and he's gone. Ridiculed by President Trump in recent months, Sessions recused from oversight into the Russian investigation. With me now, Tara Setmeyer, a Republican strategist and political commentator, and Andrew Sullivan, columnist for the New York Times. Tara.
Well, I can't say that I'm surprised. I mean, Jeff Sessions has been the target of Donald Trump's ire ever since he made the correct decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. Donald Trump never got over that. He's constantly belittled him and emasculated him in his position as Attorney General since that time in the spring of 2017. So it was clear that this was Jeff Sessions' dream job. So the fact that he resigned is just a softer way of saying that he was pushed out. It was clear that that was going to happen, and I'm just surprised it happened this quickly, but Jeff Sessions was one of the first to go after the midterms.
Andrew Sullivan, it sounds like he was forced. Does it actually mean, too, that possibly he could appoint somebody who might get under the Mueller investigation and possibly even stop it?
That's the whole point. The whole point of the railing against Sessions that Trump has had for the last 2 years is to defeat the Justice Department, to turn the Justice Department into his own department, to actually launch investigations into his political opponents, to completely politicize it. Jeff Sessions was the last thing standing in defense of the rule of law against this president, and that's gone. And so this is a very big development.
Well, not quite. I mean, Jeff Sessions was not in charge of the Mueller investigation. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is because of the recusal. So Jeff Sessions being there or not doesn't really matter for the Mueller investigation so much directly, but whoever Trump picks next has to get confirmed by the Senate, which is why the Republican control of the Senate, maintaining their control of the Senate, was so important for the Republicans in the president's agenda.
Is this, Andrew, an immediate challenge for the Congress, for the House? I mean, can Nancy Pelosi do anything about it?
No, this is a Senate confirmation process. The question before was whether the Senate would appoint anybody else. But Sessions actually quitting makes that a little moot. And I wonder if Lindsey Graham will be the natural person. But the worry is that this is entirely about preventing the Justice Department from effectively investigating the Trump administration, which means it's all up to the House. But the House doesn't really have that much power. The Senate is basically going to make sure that this president isn't successfully impeached in the next 2 years and help him get reelected.
Well, it does add to the sour taste of battle that still hangs in the air. The filthy language, the racism, and the violence and abuse.
What we've seen, I think, yesterday is that he did better than Obama did in his first midterms. He did better than Clinton did in his first midterms. And he did that after the most disgusting, racist, xenophobic, vicious campaign that we've ever seen at a national level. So that means that the country doesn't mind that. The country is ready for that. The country is eager for that.
Parts of the country are not okay with that because we saw in suburban districts across the country that the Trumpism that Andrew refers to was repudiated clearly.
Are you tiring of it yourself?
Oh, I've been tired of it since the campaign. I didn't support Donald Trump for a number of reasons, one of them being his lack of character and integrity and the fact that he has trafficked in racism and bigotry.
What's it done to your loyalty to the party?
It's made it very difficult. I have reassessed how strongly I can support the Republican Party as a result of not only the embrace of what Donald Trump has turned it into. I feel like it's a perversion of what republicanism is, or a perversion of what conservatism is. You know, I'm a Bill Buckley, Jack Kemp, Ronald Reagan conservative. That's not what Donald Trump represents. So the fact that the party did not hold him accountable for a lot of what he's done, which are anathema to Republican principles, is very disappointing for me. And it was reflected in the midterm elections in the House.
The people elected as Republicans in the House and Senate are much more in Trump's line. I mean, the thing that happened in this election was every single moderate Republican has been wiped out.
Yep.
So what you have is a real transformation of the Republican Party into a Trump cult. And I think the main victim of that is going to be the rule of law.
Yeah.
And that's why Sessions' departure is so worrying and troubling.
Can I just ask you an international question? Take it away for people like us who have to live with this from beyond your shores. I mean, is it going to get any better? Might he reverse himself on climate change?
No.
Might he? No?
No, Donald Trump is who he is. He's incorrigible. He is dug in. He's learned over the years to double down instead of ever apologizing. So if you think that Donald Trump's going to pivot, that's never going to happen. We have to have the balance.
Give us hope in 15 seconds.
There is no hope in this country. Obviously, there's always some hope.
You're quite conservative.
I'm an old school conservative like you are. I'm a Reagan conservative.
Yes.
No, this is a new phenomenon. This is real.
It is.
It's staying. It's here, and it's terrifying.
Well, I hate to end on such a note, but Andrew Sullivan.
I think that the Republican Senate has been a little bit more sane than the House. So there's a firewall.
Thank you very much.